My name is Connie. I am 28 years old, and I never thought my success would become my greatest heartbreak. When I unexpectedly inherited millions from my biological grandmother, I moved back to my hometown to reconnect with my parents after years of emotional distance. Their sudden warmth seemed like the family connection I had always craved until I overheard those crushing words on their back porch. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my greedy parents, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of standing up for yourself. I grew up in a modest two-bedroom house in Portland where my childhood was comfortable, but emotionally barren. My parents, Thomas and Diana, provided the basics, but remained distant throughout my formative years. There were no warm hugs after school, no enthusiastic cheering at my academic competitions, just a persistent sense that I was an obligation rather than a joy. My father worked as an insurance salesman, often returning home tired and irritable, while my mother taught part-time at the local community college. They never seemed to have much time for me or interest in my accomplishments. Looking back now, I can see how they treated me differently from my younger brother, Jack. While they were not exactly warm with him either, there was always a different quality to their interaction with him. More patience, more interest, more willingness to engage. I told myself it was because he was the baby of the family, or maybe because he was a boy, but there was always something that made me feel like an outsider in my own home. Connie, stop being so sensitive, my mother would say whenever I tried to express my feelings. Not everyone gets to be the center of attention all the time. By 18, I was more than ready to leave. I secured a full scholarship to a university in California, packed everything I owned into my secondhand Honda, and drove away without looking back. The goodbye was perfunctory. My father shook my hand like I was a business associate, and my mother gave me a quick side hug before reminding me to drive carefully. "Call when you get there," she said, though I knew they would not have noticed if I had not. College became my real home. I thrived in the computer science program, finding my passion in app development. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who appreciated my intelligence and drive. My roommate Amanda became the sister I had never had, and her family embraced me during holidays when returning to Portland seemed too painful. After graduation, I secured a position at a tech startup in San Francisco and began building my career. My communications with my parents dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional birthday text. They rarely asked about my life, and when they did, they seemed to be going through the motions rather than genuinely caring. Yes, work is fine. I would say, not bothering to mention my promotions or successful projects. No, not dating anyone serious right now. They never probed deeper, and our calls rarely lasted more than 10 minutes. 3 years into my career, I took the leap and started my own company, developing a financial planning app that helped young professionals manage their budgets and investments. The app took off beyond my wildest expectations, featured in tech magazines and recommended by financial advisors nationwide. I was working 16-hour days, but loving every minute of building something meaningful. Then came the letter that changed everything. An elegant cream envelope arrived at my apartment containing a formal letter from a law firm I had never heard of. As I read it, my hands began to shake. According to the letter, my paternal grandmother, Eleanor Grant, had passed away and named me as her primary beneficiary. The inheritance was substantial, approximately $8.5 million, along with property holdings and investment portfolios. I sat on my couch stunned. I had no memory of my grandmother. According to my father, she had cut ties with him before I was born over some family dispute. He had always spoken of her bitterly on the rare occasions her name came up. "She chose her money over her family," he would say dismissively. "Not worth thinking about." The lawyers explained that Eleanor had actually tried to connect with me several times over the years, but had been rebuffed. She had kept track of my career and was proud of what I had accomplished on my own. In her final years, she had decided to leave her fortune to me, the granddaughter she had never been allowed to know. I was still processing this information when my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice warmer than I had heard it in years. "Connie, darling, Your father and I were just talking about you and wondering how you have been. It has been far too long since we have had a good catch up. I frowned at my phone, confused by the sudden interest. We had spoken briefly at Christmas just 2 months earlier, and she had seemed as disinterested as always. Now she was chatting animatedly, asking detailed questions about my life and work. We miss you so much, sweetheart, she continued, the endearment foreign and uncomfortable. Why not come home for a visit? Your old room is just as you left it. That was the first red flag. My old room had been converted to a home office before I had even left for college. My belongings had been packed in boxes and moved to the garage to make space for my father's desk and filing cabinets. Over the next few weeks, the calls increased in frequency. Both my parents began reaching out separately, their messages filled with nostalgia and expressions of love that had been absent throughout my childhood. My father even mentioned being proud of my business success, something he had never acknowledged before. Your mother and I have been thinking, he said during one call. We are not getting any younger, and family is what matters most. We would love if you would consider moving back to Portland. We have lost so much time, and we want to make up for it. Against my better judgment and the concerned advice of Amanda, I decided to take a leave of absence from my company and move back to Portland temporarily. I bought a beautiful house not far from my parents, thinking it would give me independence, while still allowing for the family reconnection they seemed to want. Are you sure about this? Lindsay, my financial advisor, asked when I told her my plans. This is a significant life change right after receiving your inheritance. They are my parents, I replied, hearing the defensiveness in my voice. People change. They are reaching out, and I should at least meet them halfway. Lindsay nodded, but looked unconvinced. Just remember to keep your financial matters private until you have reestablished trust. Large inheritances can complicate family dynamics. I thanked her for the advice, but secretly thought she was being overly cautious. These were my parents, not strangers trying to scam me. If they had flaws in how they had raised me well, who does not? I was an adult now, financially secure and emotionally stronger. I could handle whatever came my way. Looking back, I wish I had listened to Lindsay and Amanda. I wish I had seen the warning signs for what they were. But I was so desperate for family connections, so hungry for parental love, that I walked straight into their trap with my eyes wide open. My return to Portland started promisingly enough. My parents held a welcome dinner at their house, which looked exactly the same as I remembered, except for new furniture in the living room. The forced cheerfulness was a bit uncomfortable, but I attributed it to the years of distance between us. Relationships take time to rebuild, I told myself. To Connie, my father toasted, raising his glass of expensive wine I had brought. Our successful daughter who has made us so proud. My mother beamed, reaching over to squeeze my hand. We have missed you so much, darling. Having you back is the best gift we could ask for. Their words warmed me, despite the nagging voice in the back of my mind that wondered why they had never expressed these sentiments before. I pushed the doubts away and allowed myself to hope that this was a new chapter for our family. The first sign that things were not what they seemed came about 2 weeks after my return. My father called, his voice tight with stress. The roof is leaking badly, he said without preamble. The estimate for repairs is $12,000, and our insurance is giving us the runaround. I hate to ask, but since you are doing so well now, I agreed immediately, wanting to help and eager to prove my value to the family. When I dropped off the check the next day, my mother hugged me tightly. You have no idea what a relief this is, she said. We have been so worried about how to manage. A week later, it was my mother calling about a dental procedure not covered by insurance. Then my father needed a new car because his was no longer reliable. Each request was prefaced with reluctance, followed by effusive gratitude, and accompanied by increased invitations to family meals and activities. I began to notice how often our conversations turned to money, my inheritance, or my business success. My parents introduced me to their friends with emphasis on my financial achievements rather than my character or happiness. This is our daughter, Connie, my mother would say, her arm linked through mine. She just sold her tech company for millions, and now she has inherited a fortune from Thomas's mother. We always knew she would be successful. This was another red flag, as I had not sold my company, but merely taken a leave of absence, and I certainly had not shared the specific amount of my inheritance with them, though they seemed to have a surprisingly accurate idea of the figure. Around this time, my brother Jack came to visit me at my new house. Unlike my parents, Jack's behavior toward me had not changed. He was the same quietly supportive brother he had always been, though we had never been particularly close due to the 5-year age gap and my early departure from home. "Nice place," he said, wandering through my living room. "Mom and Dad cannot stop talking about it." "They seem really happy I am back," I said, testing the waters. Jack gave me a long look. "Yeah, they are, definitely. Excited about having you around again." His hesitation made me uncomfortable. "What does that mean?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just be careful, okay? People do not always change as much as we want them to." Before I could press him further, my phone rang. It was Lindsay, my financial advisor, calling for our scheduled check-in. "How are things going with the family reunion?" she asked after we had discussed some investment options. "Good, I think," I said, glancing at Jack, who was pretending not to listen. "They are really making an effort." "And have they asked about your finances?" I hesitated. "Nothing inappropriate, just normal family stuff. My dad did mention he has a friend who is a financial advisor who would love to meet me." Lindsay's voice sharpened. "Connie, I would strongly advise against changing advisors right now, especially to someone with connections to your family. It is important to maintain independent financial counsel." "Of course," I assured her. "I am not planning to make any changes." After we hung up, Jack raised an eyebrow. "Dad is trying to get you to switch financial advisors." "He just mentioned his friend," I said defensively. "His friend Martin, the guy who lost half his clients after that investment scheme blew up last year." This was news to me. "I do not know who it is. Dad just said he is very successful." Jack shook his head, but said nothing more on the subject. The next concerning incident happened at a neighborhood barbecue my parents hosted. I arrived to find not just the usual neighbors, but several extended family members I barely remembered, including cousins I had not seen since childhood. My second cousin Rachel cornered me by the drinks table. "Connie, it is so good to see you after all these years. You look amazing." "Thanks," I replied, trying to recall if we had ever had a single conversation as children. "So I heard you are doing really well," she continued, lowering her voice. "I hate to bring this up at a party, but I am in a really tight spot with Jamie's college tuition. The financial aid fell through, and we are looking at $30,000 we do not have. Your mom mentioned you might be in a position to help family out." I nearly choked on my drink. My mother had not only discussed my financial situation with extended family, but had apparently offered my assistance without consulting me. Throughout the party, 3 more relatives approached with similar stories of financial hardship, each one mentioning that Thomas and Diana said you would not mind helping out. By the time I left, I felt like I had a target on my back. That night, I called Amanda, my old roommate and closest friend. "I am starting to feel like an ATM machine," I confessed after relating the events of the barbecue. "Connie," Amanda said gently, "from what you have told me, this does not sound like a family reconnection. This sounds like they found out about your inheritance and are taking advantage." "That is a pretty harsh assessment," I said, though part of me feared she was right. "They are not perfect, but they are still my parents." "Being related by blood does not give people the right to use you," she countered. "Just promise me you will be careful and not make any major financial decisions without talking to Lindsay first." I promised, but the seed of doubt had been firmly planted. I began paying closer attention to patterns in my parents' behavior that I had been willfully ignoring. My father had begun dropping frequent hints about a business opportunity he wanted to discuss. "It is the chance of a lifetime," he would say. "With the right investor, it could really take off." My mother had taken to showing me brochures for luxury cruises and timeshares, sighing about how she and my father had never been able to afford such experiences. The final warning came from an unexpected source. I ran into my parents' longtime neighbor, Mrs. Winters, at the grocery store. She seemed genuinely pleased to see me. "Connie, what a wonderful surprise. Your parents must be thrilled to have you home." "They seem to be," I agreed. She lowered her voice. I hope you do not mind me saying this, but I was surprised by the change in how they talk about you. For years, whenever I asked about you, they were so dismissive. Now they cannot stop talking about their successful, generous daughter. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Dismissive how? Mrs. Winters looked uncomfortable. Oh, just, they never seem very interested in your life in California. Your mother once said you were too busy with your little computer job to bother with family. But people change, right? Maybe they have had a genuine change of heart. I thanked her and quickly finished my shopping, my mind racing. A genuine change of heart, or a change in my perceived value to them. I was beginning to fear it was the latter. It was a beautiful Tuesday afternoon when my world fell apart. I had been feeling increasingly uneasy about my parents' behavior, but was still clinging to the hope that there was genuine affection behind their renewed interest in my life. I decided to stop by their house unannounced, thinking a spontaneous visit might give me a more authentic glimpse of their feelings. I parked my car a few houses down a habit from childhood when I would walk home from school. As I approached, I heard voices from the back porch, my parents, and a man whose voice I recognized as their friend Gerald. I was about to call out a greeting when my father's words stopped me cold. Connie is too foolish to notice we only keep her around for her money, he said, followed by a hearty laugh. All those years of ignoring her, and now she thinks we have had some kind of epiphany about family values. I froze in place, hidden by the large rhododendron bush at the side of the house. My mother's voice drifted clearly through the warm air. You should see how eager she is for our approval. A little compliment here, a family dinner there, and she's writing checks without even asking questions. I almost feel bad for her, Gerald chuckled. Almost. Well, she always was an overly sensitive child. Too needy. But now that neediness is paying off for us, so I guess it worked out. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move as their conversation continued, each word driving a deeper knife into my heart. How much have you gotten so far? Gerald asked. My father sounded smug. About 50,000 for various home repairs and medical bills, most of which were greatly exaggerated. But that is just the beginning. I have been laying the groundwork for her to invest in my business venture, the real estate development. But that is just a shell corporation. She does not need to know that. Once she transfers the investment funds, we can restructure and write off the loss. Meanwhile, the money goes right into our retirement fund. And she has no idea you knew about Eleanor's will before she did, Gerald asked. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. My parents had known about my grandmother's fortune. Not a clue, my mother replied. Thomas's mother tried to reach out to Connie several times over the years, but we made sure those messages never got through. The old lady was just trying to spite us by connecting with her directly. We had a good laugh when the lawyers contacted us first as next of kin, my father added. We knew the money was coming to Connie, but we had time to plan our approach. The look on her face when we suddenly wanted to reconnect, it was almost too easy. What about your son, Jack? Is he in on this? My mother made a dismissive noise. Jack is too straight-laced. He would never approve. We have told him we had a genuine change of heart about Connie. I think he is suspicious, but he will not interfere. The next step is to get her to update her will, my father continued. Now that she has the inheritance, we need to ensure it comes to us if anything happens to her. Diana has been researching estate planners. You know what would be even better, my mother said, her voice dropping slightly, if she made us co-trustees of the estate. For tax purposes, of course. Then we would have direct access without waiting for her to write checks. The three of them laughed, and I heard glasses clinking in a toast. My vision blurred with tears, and my legs finally unfroze. I backed away silently, my heart pounding so loudly. I was sure they would hear it. Somehow I made it to my car without being seen. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely insert the key in the ignition. I drove aimlessly, not wanting to return to my house, where my parents could find me, not wanting to be anywhere familiar. I ended up at a hotel on the outskirts of Portland, checking in with mechanical movements, my mind still reeling from what I had heard. Once inside the anonymous room, I finally allowed myself to break down. The tears came in violent waves, accompanied by nausea and a crushing pain in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. Everything suddenly made sense, all the red flags I had ignored in my desperate desire for family connection. The sudden warmth after years of indifference, the escalating financial requests, the introductions to their financial friends, the hints about investing in my father's business. But knowing about my grandmother was the cruelest blow. They had actively prevented me from having a relationship with her, the one family member who had wanted to know me for myself, not for what I could provide. Now she was gone, and I would never have the chance to meet her. I curled up on the hotel bed, my phone buzzing repeatedly with messages from my parents, probably wondering where I was and why I had missed our planned dinner. I could not bear to look at their fake concern, knowing the truth behind their words. Instead, I called the one person I knew I could trust. Lindsay answered on the second ring. "Connie, is everything all right?" "No," I managed between sobs. "Everything is very much not all right." I poured out the whole story, repeating the devastating conversation I had overheard word for word. Lindsay listened without interrupting, only occasionally making sounds of sympathy or outrage. When I finally finished exhausted and empty, she spoke with calm determination. "First, I want you to know that none of this is your fault. Wanting a relationship with your parents is natural, and they exploited that desire in the most despicable way." "I feel so stupid," I whispered. "You tried to warn me." "You are not stupid, Connie. You are a compassionate person who wanted to believe the best about your family. That is a strength, not a weakness. But now we need to protect you and your assets." Lindsay spent the next hour outlining immediate steps I should take, from securing my accounts to documenting all the gifts I had already provided. She also recommended a therapist who specialized in family betrayal, knowing the emotional toll would be as significant as the financial concerns. "Do you want me to fly up there?" she asked finally. "You should not have to go through this alone." Her kindness brought fresh tears to my eyes. "No, but thank you. I need some time to think. I will call you tomorrow after I have had some sleep." But sleep did not come easily that night or the next. I spent 3 days in the hotel, venturing out only for necessities, ignoring the increasingly frantic messages from my parents. My mind oscillated between crushing grief and white-hot anger, between self-recrimination for my naivete and fury at their calculated manipulation. On the third day, I received a text from Jack. "Are you okay? Parents are freaking out that they cannot reach you." I hesitated, unsure if I could trust even him. But I needed to talk to someone who knew my parents, someone who might help me make sense of this nightmare. "Can you meet me?" I texted back, providing the name of a coffee shop far from our usual neighborhoods. Jack arrived looking worried, his eyes widening when he saw my haggard appearance. "Connie, what happened? Mom and Dad think you have had some kind of breakdown." "I overheard them talking with Gerald," I said without preamble, "about how they are using me for my money, about how I am too foolish to notice." Jack's face fell, and he closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was no surprise, only resignation and guilt. "You knew," I stated flatly. He nodded miserably. "Not everything, not about them intercepting messages from Grandma Eleanor, but I suspected they were taking advantage of your inheritance. That is why I tried to warn you to be careful." "Why did you not tell me outright?" "I did not have proof, just suspicions based on how quickly they changed their tune about you. And," he hesitated, "they are still our parents. I guess I hoped I was wrong." We talked for hours, Jack filling in gaps in my understanding of our family dynamics. How our parents had always been obsessed with money and status, but had never achieved the wealth they felt entitled to. How they had resented my grandmother for cutting my father out of her will after a falling out decades ago. How they had treated Jack differently, because he had shown no ambition to leave Portland or pursue higher education, posing no threat to their control. "They always saw your independence as a rejection," Jack explained. "When you left for college and built your own life without their help, it wounded their pride. Then when you became successful on your own and inherited Grandma's money, it was like a double insult. In their minds, they deserve that money more than you do." "What kind of parents think that way?" I asked, my voice breaking. The kind who see children as extensions of themselves, not as individuals with their own lives and feelings. Jack reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I am so sorry, Connie. I should have been more direct with you. I squeezed back, grateful for this small, genuine connection in the midst of so much betrayal. It is not your fault. I wanted so badly to believe they had changed. That conversation with Jack marked a turning point. As painful as the truth was, it was also clarifying. The fog of confusion and self-doubt began to lift, replaced by a growing sense of determination. These people had not only manipulated me financially, but had robbed me of a relationship with my grandmother, and years of my life spent yearning for love they were incapable of giving. That evening, I called Lindsay again, my voice steadier than it had been in days. I am ready to do more than just protect myself, I told her. I want them to face consequences for what they have done. Not just with me, but with trying to block my relationship with my grandmother. What did you have in mind? Lindsay asked. Something that exposes the truth, I replied, an idea taking shape in my mind. Something that shows them exactly who is the fool in this situation. 3 days of isolation gave way to clarity and purpose. The initial shock and heartbreak transformed into a steely resolve as I began formulating my response to my parents' betrayal. I could not change the past, could not recover the lost opportunity to know my grandmother, but I could take control of what happened next. I finally answered one of my mother's calls, making my voice small and apologetic. I am so sorry for disappearing, I said. I just needed some time alone to think about some business issues. I should have let you know. We were worried sick, my mother replied, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. Your father and I were about to file a missing persons report. You cannot just vanish like that, Connie. We are family. The word family from her lips now made my skin crawl, but I forced warmth into my voice. I know, and I am sorry. To make it up to you, I want to share some exciting news. Can I come over for dinner tonight? At my parents' house that evening, I spun a tale about a new app my company was developing, one with revolutionary potential that early investors would benefit from tremendously. My father's eyes lit up with naked greed. It sounds fascinating, he said, trying to appear casually interested rather than eager. How far along in development are you? Almost ready for the first funding round, I replied. Actually, that is why I disappeared for a few days. I was finalizing the business plan and financial projections. Well, you know your father has quite a head for business, my mother interjected. Perhaps he could look over your materials, give you the benefit of his experience. I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face now that I saw through their facade. That would be wonderful. In fact, I was thinking of holding a small presentation for potential investors, close family and trusted friends only at this early stage. My father could barely contain his excitement. What kind of investment threshold are we talking about? For family, I would allow smaller initial investments, perhaps starting at $50,000. But the real returns would come with larger commitments, of course. They exchanged a look that I now recognized as calculation, not affection. When are you thinking of holding this presentation? My father asked. 2 weeks from now. I will rent a conference room at the Grand Hotel, make it a proper event with refreshments. Very exclusive. We will be there, my mother assured me. And we might know a few others who would be interested, people of means with an eye for opportunity. The more the merrier, I said brightly. Just make sure they understand this is confidential. I would not want word getting out before we are ready to launch publicly. As I drove home that night, the first phase of my plan set in motion, I felt an unfamiliar sense of power. For too long, I had been the trusting daughter seeking approval. Now, I was taking control of the narrative. The next morning, I called Lindsay to put the financial aspects of my plan into action. We worked together to create convincing but entirely fictional investment materials, complete with impressive projections and glossy presentation slides. The app we invented, called Trust Fund, claimed to use artificial intelligence to identify trust dynamics in business relationships, supposedly helping users avoid financial exploitation. The irony is delicious, Lindsay commented as we finalized the materials. But are you sure this is the route you want to take? It would be simpler to just cut them off and move on. They need to be exposed, I said firmly. Not just to me, but to everyone they have fooled with their facade of respectability. And I need closure, a clean break where everything is out in the open. Next, I contacted a security firm to discreetly record the presentation. I wanted documentation of what would transpire both for my own peace of mind and as protection against any potential blowback. While these preparations were underway, I continued the charade with my parents, meeting them for dinners and providing tantalizing additional details about the fictional investment opportunity. My father grew increasingly pushy about seeing the financial details in advance. As your father, I want to make sure you are protected, he insisted during one dinner. Business can be cutthroat and not everyone has your best interests at heart. The audacity of this statement nearly made me laugh out loud, but I maintained my facade of appreciation. That means a lot, Dad, but I want to present everything properly at the event. It will be worth the wait, I promise. Meanwhile, my mother had begun a campaign of her own, one focused on my grandmother's inheritance. Have you thought about estate planning? She asked casually over coffee one afternoon. At your age, it probably seems unnecessary, but with your new financial status, it is really quite important. I have been thinking about it, I replied truthfully. She brightened. Wonderful. You know, for simplicity, many people name their parents as executors or even co-trustees. It makes things so much easier from a practical standpoint. That is an interesting suggestion, I said neutrally. I will keep it in mind. What she did not know was that I had already met with an estate attorney recommended by Lindsay. My new will explicitly excluded my parents from any inheritance and established a foundation in my grandmother's name to support education for underprivileged students, along with provisions for Jack and a few close friends. As the day of the presentation approached, my parents ramped up their efforts. My father invited me to lunch with a surprise guest, an attorney friend who just happened to specialize in estate law. The man spent most of the meal subtly advocating for family-centered estate planning, emphasizing the tax benefits of certain arrangements that would give my parents significant control over my assets. I thanked him politely for his insights, while internally documenting every manipulative tactic for my presentation. The night before the event, Jack came to my house looking troubled. Mom and Dad have invited practically everyone they know who has money, he said. They are talking about this like it is their investment opportunity, not yours. Let them, I replied. The more witnesses, the better. Jack studied my face. You are not really launching an app, are you? I hesitated, then decided to trust him with the truth. No, I am exposing their scheme. Instead of trying to dissuade me, Jack nodded slowly. Good. It is time someone held them accountable. He paused. What can I do to help? His support meant more than I could express. Together we finalized the last details of my plan. Jack offering insights into our parents' psychology that helped me anticipate their reactions. They will try to spin it, he warned. Dad especially. He will claim it was all a misunderstanding or that you misheard. Be prepared for that. I thought of the clear recording I had of their conversation with Gerald, which I had gone back to the house to obtain using a directional microphone when I knew they would be discussing their plans again. I have proof they cannot talk their way around. The morning of the presentation arrived with a strange calm settling over me. I had cycled through grief, rage, and despair, but now I felt only a clear-headed determination to reclaim my dignity and expose the truth. As I dressed in my most professional outfit and gathered my materials, I thought of my grandmother Eleanor, a woman I had never met, but who had tried to reach me, who had valued me sight unseen. Today would be for her too, a reckoning long overdue. The Grand Hotel Sapphire conference room was the perfect setting for what I had planned, elegant yet businesslike, with excellent audiovisual capabilities and a layout that would allow me to observe everyone's reactions. I arrived 2 hours early to oversee the final preparations, ensuring the presentation slides were loaded correctly and the recording equipment was discreetly positioned. My parents arrived 45 minutes early, dressed in their finest clothes, practically vibrating with anticipation. My mother air-kissed my cheek while my father pumped my hand enthusiastically. "We have brought some very interested potential investors," he announced proudly. "Serious players in the Portland business community. You will make quite an impression." I smiled, maintaining the facade for just a little longer. "Thank you for your support. It means everything to have family behind me." The room gradually filled with about 30 people, a mix of my parents' friends, business associates, and various relatives I barely remembered from childhood. Jack arrived last, giving me a subtle nod of encouragement as he took a seat near the back. At exactly 7 o'clock, I moved to the podium and welcomed everyone. "Good evening, and thank you all for coming to this private investment presentation. As many of you know, I am Connie Grant, and I have spent the last several years developing applications in the financial technology sector." I clicked to the first slide, which displayed the fictional trust fund app logo. Tonight, I am excited to share with you a groundbreaking new application that addresses a critical issue in both personal and professional relationships, trust and financial exploitation. For the next 15 minutes, I presented the fictional app with all the enthusiasm and detail of a genuine business pitch. I could see my father leaning forward eagerly, practically counting his anticipated profits. My mother was working the room with her eyes, noting which of their friends seemed most interested. "Now, before we discuss investment opportunities," I continued smoothly, "I would like to talk about the inspiration behind this application." I clicked to a new slide which simply displayed the words, "She is too foolish to notice we only keep her around for her money." A confused murmur ran through the room. My parents' smiles froze on their faces. "This quote might seem strange out of context," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "Allow me to provide that context." The next slide showed a photo of my parents' house, specifically their back porch. 3 weeks ago, I overheard a conversation between my parents Thomas and Diana Grant and their friend Gerald Hoffman. I would like to share that conversation with you now. I pressed play on the audio recording. My father's voice filled the room crystal clear. "Connie is too foolish to notice we only keep her around for her money. All those years of ignoring her, and now she thinks we have had some kind of epiphany about family values." My mother's voice followed. "You should see how eager she is for our approval. A little compliment here, a family dinner there, and she is writing checks without even asking questions. I almost feel bad for her." The recording continued, capturing their detailed plans to manipulate me into investing in my father's shell corporation, and their laughter about how easy I was to fool. The room grew painfully silent, except for the damning audio evidence. I watched my parents' faces transform from confusion to horror to desperate calculation as they realized what was happening. My father half rose from his seat as if to interrupt, but Jack placed a firm hand on his shoulder, keeping him in place. When the recording ended with my parents discussing how to become co-trustees of my estate, I returned to the podium, my voice now carrying a strength I had not known I possessed. As you can see, there is no app called Trust Fund. There is no investment opportunity. What there is, however, is a valuable lesson about trust family and the lengths some people will go to for financial gain. I clicked through to the next series of slides, which documented the financial requests my parents had made since my return to Portland, along with evidence of my father's non-existent business venture and my mother's deliberate efforts to isolate me from other family members. Perhaps most painful, I continued, bringing up a new slide with photographs of my grandmother Eleanor, was discovering that my parents actively prevented me from having a relationship with my grandmother, who tried multiple times over the years to connect with me. They intercepted her letters, blocked her calls, and lied to both of us about the other's interest in a relationship. Gasps came from several people in the audience, as Winters, my parents' neighbor, was staring at them with undisguised disgust. I called this meeting not to embarrass my parents publicly. I said, though, that was certainly a satisfying side effect, but to make a clear statement about boundaries and consequences. I wanted everyone here to understand that what may have been presented to you as a close family reconciliation was in fact an orchestrated scheme to access my inheritance. My father finally found his voice, standing up and attempting to take control of the situation. "This is ridiculous. Connie has clearly misunderstood private conversations and taken things out of context. We have only ever wanted what is best for her." Is that why you described me as too needy and laughed about how my emotional vulnerability made me easy to manipulate? I asked quietly. Is that why you created a shell corporation for me to invest in planning to restructure it after getting my money? That is not what we meant. My mother interjected, her voice shrill. Gerald was misunderstanding our concerns about protecting your assets. We were worried about other people taking advantage of you. Their desperate backpedaling might have been amusing if it were not so pathetic. I simply played another clip from the recording, this one featuring my mother specifically discussing how to become a co-trustee to gain direct access to my funds. Several people were already standing gathering their belongings and moving toward the exits, unwilling to be associated with what was clearly a humiliating exposure. My second cousin Rachel caught my eye and mouthed, "I am sorry," before slipping out. For those of you who were brought here under false pretenses, I apologize for the discomfort, I said. But I believe in transparency, something my family has sorely lacked. I moved to my final slide. Instead of an investment in a fictional app, I would like to announce the establishment of the Eleanor Grant Foundation named for the grandmother I never had the chance to know. This foundation will provide educational opportunities for first-generation college students and support for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. This announcement was met with a smattering of genuine applause, led by Jack, who was now standing at the back of the room, a proud smile on his face. If anyone is interested in contributing to this foundation instead of my parents' retirement fund, information is available by the door. Thank you for your time. As people filed out, my parents remained seated, seemingly stunned by the swift and complete dismantling of their plans. When the room had nearly emptied, my father approached me, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You have no idea what you have done," he hissed. "You have humiliated us in front of everyone we know." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Dad. You humiliated yourselves when you decided to exploit your daughter instead of loving her." My mother joined him, tears streaming down her face. Whether they were tears of shame or simply the realization that their financial scheme had collapsed, I could not tell. "How can you do this to us?" she demanded. "After everything we have done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Kept me at emotional arm's length my entire life, prevented me from knowing my grandmother, seen me as nothing but a potential source of income. Please enlighten me about my great debt to you both." They had no answer to this, just sputtering indignation and attempts to rewrite the narrative even now. "We are done," I said quietly. "Any further communication can go through my attorney. I have already arranged for the return of the money I gave you for the roof and other expenses, which my lawyer will be contacting you about shortly." I turned to leave Jack falling into step beside me. My parents called after us, their voices a mixture of anger and panic. But for the first time in my life, I felt no obligation to respond, no pull to turn back and seek their approval. I walked out of that conference room feeling lighter than I had in years. The burden of their expectations and my own desperate hope for their love finally lifted from my shoulders. Outside in the cool evening air, Jack gave me a sideways hug. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen. "I am just sorry you are caught in the middle," I replied. He shook his head. "I am not in the middle. I am firmly on your side. Always have been, always will be." Lindsay was waiting in the hotel lobby, having watched the proceedings via secure video link. She embraced me warmly. "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. Like I have finally stopped trying to win a game that was rigged from the start, like I can breathe again. The three of us left together, stepping into a future unburdened by toxic expectations and manipulative love. My parents had thought me a fool, but in the end, I had shown them exactly who was in control of my story. 6 months after the confrontation at the Grand Hotel, I found myself settling into my new home in Seattle, a modern apartment with a view of Puget Sound that still took my breath away each morning. The physical distance from Portland had been an essential part of my healing process, allowing me to create clear boundaries while I processed the complicated emotions of family betrayal. The immediate aftermath of the presentation had been chaotic. My parents had alternated between angry accusations, tearful apologies that rang hollow, and even threats of legal action, though their attorney quickly advised them against pursuing that path given the recorded evidence I possessed. Eventually, they retreated into a sullen silence, communicating only through their lawyer regarding the return of the money I had given them under false pretenses. The wider fallout in their social circle had been significant. Several longtime friends had cut ties with them after witnessing their exposure, and my father's business reputation had suffered considerably. I took no joy in their social discomfort, but I also recognized it as the natural consequence of their actions, not my responsibility to shield them from. My relationship with Jack had grown stronger through the experience. Without our parents' manipulative presence, we discovered we had more in common than we had realized. He had moved to Seattle a month after I did, taking a job at a local brewery and enrolling in night classes to finish his long-delayed college degree. I never really understood why I kept putting off school, he told me over dinner one evening. But now I see I was stuck in their orbit, letting their low expectations define me. Watching you break free showed me I could do the same. My financial advisor, Lindsay, had been instrumental in helping me establish appropriate boundaries and structures for my inheritance. We had worked together to create the Eleanor Grant Foundation, which had already provided scholarships to 15 first-generation college students and seed funding for 3 young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. "Your grandmother would be proud," Lindsay said during our quarterly review. "You have transformed her gift into something meaningful, something that reflects what she tried to do for you." Those words meant more to me than Lindsay could know. Though I would never meet Eleanor Grant, I had begun to feel a connection to her through learning about her life. I had reached out to her former friends and associates, piecing together a portrait of a strong, independent woman who had built her own success despite the obstacles of her time. Martha Jennings, Eleanor's closest friend for over 30 years, had invited me to her home and shared photographs and stories that brought tears to my eyes. "She tried so hard to reach you," Martha told me, showing me a box of birthday cards Eleanor had written but never been able to send. "Your father could be very stubborn and controlling, just like his father before him. Eleanor refused to enable that behavior, which is why they cut ties." "What was she like?" I asked, handling the unsent cards with reverence. Martha's eyes crinkled with fond remembrance. "Brilliant, determined. She built her real estate business from nothing in an era when women were not supposed to be in business at all. But she was also deeply kind, the sort of friend who remembered every important date and showed up without being asked when you were in trouble." I learned that Eleanor had followed my career from afar, keeping news clippings about my tech company and telling her friends about her brilliant granddaughter. The knowledge that she had cared, had wanted to know me, helped heal some of the raw edges of my parents' betrayal. In honor of her memory, I had begun volunteering as a mentor to young women interested in technology careers, passing forward the support I wished I had received earlier in my life. These relationships, built on genuine care and respect, rather than obligation or advantage, had become a cornerstone of my new life. Therapy had been another essential element of my healing journey. Dr. Michaels specialized in family estrangement and had helped me navigate the complex grief of losing the idea of parents, rather than actual loving relationships. "What you are mourning," she explained during one particularly insightful session, "is not the parents you had, but the parents you deserved and never received. That is a profound loss, and it deserves to be honored." With her guidance, I had stopped blaming myself for being too needy or too sensitive, recognizing those as cruel labels applied by people incapable of healthy emotional connection. I began to see my capacity for trust and hope as strengths rather than weaknesses, even if they had made me vulnerable to manipulation. "The goal is not to become cynical or closed off," Dr. Michaels reminded me. "It is to learn discernment, to trust yourself, to recognize authentic connection versus exploitation." That discernment had served me well as I built new relationships in Seattle. I had made genuine friends who appreciated me for my character, rather than my financial status. People who showed up consistently and reciprocated vulnerability with kindness. I had even begun dating again cautiously at first, still healing from the deep wounds of betrayal. But Alex, a marine biologist I met through a community garden project, had been patient and understanding, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. Trust takes time, he said simply when I tried to explain my hesitation. There is no rush. I am not going anywhere. On the professional front, I had returned to the tech world with renewed purpose, working on applications that helped people manage difficult transitions in their lives. My experiences had given me insight into the emotional aspects of major life changes that many developers overlooked in favor of pure functionality. The Eleanor Grant Foundation had become my passion project, something I worked on personally rather than delegating. Each scholarship recipient's story touched me deeply, reminding me that while money could be weaponized in harmful relationships, it could also be a force for positive change when used thoughtfully. As I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over Puget Sound, I reflected on how far I had come from that devastating moment of overhearing my parents' true thoughts about me. The pain had not disappeared entirely, and perhaps never would, but it had transformed into something manageable, even occasionally useful in helping others navigate similar betrayals. My phone chimed with a text from Jack. "Dinner tomorrow to celebrate my first A in advanced economics." I smiled and replied immediately, "Absolutely, my treat. So proud of you." This was what real family felt like, I realized. Not obligation or manipulation, but genuine joy in each other's successes and presence during struggles. Jack and I had created something our parents never understood, a relationship built on mutual respect and care, rather than utility. The journey of healing was ongoing with good days and difficult ones. Sometimes a random memory would surface, a childhood moment, reinterpreted through the lens of what I now knew about my parents' true feelings, and the pain would feel fresh again. But these moments grew less frequent and less overwhelming with time. I had learned that while I could not choose the family I was born into, I could absolutely choose my family of the heart. I could set boundaries that protected my well-being while still remaining open to genuine connection. I could use my grandmother's legacy to create positive change rather than allowing it to become a source of further manipulation. Most importantly, I had learned that my value was inherent, not dependent on what I could provide to others or how useful I might be. The little girl who had so desperately sought her parents' approval had grown into a woman who approved of herself, who recognized her worth beyond any external validation. Have you ever had to rebuild your sense of trust after a profound betrayal? It can feel impossible at first, like trying to reconstruct a building that has been reduced to rubble. But piece by piece, relationship by relationship, you create something new, something stronger, because it is built on a foundation of self-knowledge and clear boundaries. I would always carry the scars of my parents' betrayal, but I refused to let that experience define my capacity for connection or my future relationships. Their mistake was seeing me only for what I could give them materially. My triumph was recognizing that the greatest wealth lies in authentic relationships built on mutual care and respect. If you have experienced something similar, please share your story in the comments. How did you rebuild trust after betrayal? What helped you heal? And remember to subscribe if you want more stories about finding strength through difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it helps you know that even after the deepest betrayals, healing and joy are possible on the other side.